Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Kicking It with Cal. We are here live in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, with my beautiful cousin, Dawn Rieniets. Wanted to introduce her. I'm coming down to stay for a few weeks, and it's been a phenomenal journey so far. So, Dawn, how you doing?
I am very well, thank you, Cal. It's been awesome having you here. I saw you a year ago
Mhm.
at our cousin's wedding, and we
Great
had a
time.
super fun time, but it was very short. And before that, I don't know, might have been your brother's wedding.
It's been a while.
Yeah,
And I've been meaning to come out to Australia for 3 years now,
that's
with the
right.
original trip got canceled due to the pandemic. But 3 years later, we're here and ready to go. So I wanted to introduce the world to my amazing cousin and share some stories. So we'll go ahead and get started. So obviously, I'm staying with you here in Melbourne, and you grew up in Buffalo, New York. So when I tell people I'm coming to visit my cousin in Australia, they say, "Well, what's she doing there?" So how did you get here?
Oh man. Okay. I'll try to make it as short as possible. So after grad school, I worked in Europe for a year and I loved traveling. But then I moved back to Buffalo for a relationship that didn't work out. So in the meantime, I was just figuring out what to do with my life and like what I wanted to do because or who I wanted to be when I grew up. Couldn't figure that out. And my best friend at the time was working in Malaysia, and she said, "Well, I'm leaving my current job after in like 6 months, and then I'm going to move to Sydney." And I was like, "Yeah, cool, I'll come." So in the meantime, I went and visited her in Malaysia. I met this Australian man and I was like, oh, maybe I'll keep in touch with you. Like I had flights booked and everything. It's a very important part of the story. I did not come to Australia for love, but I stayed for it. So now 14 years later, I'm married to that man for 11 years and we have two gorgeous little girls and a dog. So yeah, that's the short version.
So I'll dive a little bit deeper into that story just
Sure.
because it's the Cliff Notes version.
Yeah.
Um, but when you said you were coming to Australia and you told Matt that, did you have intentions of meeting back up with him? What was the story like knowing you'd be in Sydney when he was living
Right,
many hours away, as you
exactly.
said?
Well, I was quite naive at the time and didn't realize how large Australia was. So, we spent about 3.5 days total together on vacation. He was with his brother. They were touring around Southeast Asia. I was in Malaysia and we met up again in Thailand. Very romantic. But yeah, I mean, at the time I really liked him and I just thought to myself, like, if not him, someone like him. That's my new standard for myself. And I remember having that very important conversation with myself. But so yeah, I we exchanged emails. So I didn't even give him my
Throwback.
number. I know I was a little jaded at the time and I didn't really expect anything to work out. So I gave him my email and I said, yeah, like when I get to Sydney, I'll look you up because I thought it was like a driving from Buffalo to New York City, which is about 6 hours, but it's
Mhm.
actually double that. So yeah, we kept in touch for about 6 months as pen pals, and then it eventually moved to texting and then phone calls. And by the time I moved to Sydney, I was like, "Am I making this all up? Like, what is going on?" And he was thinking the same thing. So, but when we saw each other again, like the chemistry was still there, which was lovely. So there you have it. So I didn't know what was going to happen.
Right. And then you made the decision, I'm gonna come down to Australia. And you were around my age at the time when you
Yeah,
came down, so it's kind of cool to fast
yeah,
forward in time.
exactly.
But what were those pros and cons like weighing in your head when you said, I'm
Sure.
gonna take my life down under?
Yeah, well, I mean, initially it was only supposed to be 1 year. So I was my plan was to just bartend and hang out and like just figure out the next steps in life and, live it up with my best friend. And if you ask her, we were both supposed to be single at the same time, which had never happened before. But yeah, I was not. And so yeah, well, and I was quite naive. I thought I'd be able to just like work for a cash in hand position, but Australia has a lot of young travelers that come to work and holiday, and I didn't have the correct visa, so I ran out of money in 3 months, and it was a big decision. And because I was 28, almost 29 at the time, it was like, this relationship feels serious, but I need to know what's going to happen because I can't stay, I can't work, so I either have to go home or figure something out. And that's when Matt asked me to move in with him. But I did have to go home first,
Mhm.
get a correct visa, so that I could work. And then I worked for about 4 months living with my parents so that I could save money to come back. So that's what I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but in 14 years, yeah, I was only home for a little 4 month stint before actually moving here. Pros and cons. At the time, I was just all in. Like I was in love. I had all those endorphins going on. It seemed fun. Like I never really, again, Australia wasn't my idea. It was my friend Michelle's idea. But I don't know, I didn't think of it. I'd always traveled. To me, the world was a small place. I didn't really understand how far away it was. So it was hard. My parents were devastated and remained so for many years.
Mhm.
Probably still are in some ways, but yeah, I didn't really see the cons were tricky. I mean, I moved here. I had a master's degree. I was 29 years old and I could only get a job as a waitress. So that was hard. It was really competitive, but also I didn't know what I wanted to go into.
Mhm.
I think Australia is a lot better at preparing young people for careers. So, like with a liberal arts degree and an English master's, I didn't know what the heck I was going to do. So, yeah, few cons. It's expensive here. All of those things were a learning curve.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you said you've been here for 14 years, and the other day you told me it doesn't feel like it's been like that long. It feels
No.
like you got here, not so long ago.
Yeah.
But over those 14 years, we talked about pros and cons, but what are some other challenges that people who move across the world face in terms of time differences and away from family? And what are some of the things that stick out to you as far as that is a
Yeah.
huge
So I
difference?
think if someone's interested in perhaps living overseas from their family, yeah, of course the time difference is something that's quite easy to get used to when you're the one who moves, but you have to keep in mind that your family and friends, like you're out of sight, out of mind. So at first it can be hurtful, like why aren't they contacting me, because they're like, oh, I don't know what time it is over there or whatever it
Check
is.
Google.
But that's just something that you have to face, and I found a lot of other expats feel the same way. So you have to be the one to reach out to your family and friends and keep that communication open. And I do find that if you put the work in, even if it's an occasional email or a message or DM like, hey, how are you, like thinking about you, um, when I go home and see friends that I've had for 30 years, it's like no time has passed. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Like don't take it personally, but know that there are a lot of challenges. And there's moving, you get homesick here and there. Australia is so far away that it's very expensive and it takes a really long time to get back home, and it's hard on your body and stuff. So it's big, but also something important to factor in, that you need to be able to take those trips home to see your family. You might miss births, deaths, marriages, but that's something that you do have to sacrifice, and it is hard.
Yeah, and we talked about that the other day, how, someone passes or there's a big event and there's absolutely no way you can get home. That's got to be tough.
It's
And you're
awful.
thinking about it and you're seeing photos
Yeah.
and it's got to weigh on you a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. I think the hardest part for me has been the losses of family, and because that's something you can't plan for. If it's a wedding and people invite you out of courtesy, like that you have to choose not to for the most part. Like there have been a few weddings I've been lucky enough to get to, but when someone passes unexpectedly, it's really hard to drop everything and get there. With me, I had young babies when I lost both of my grandparents, and my cousin, yeah, another cousin last year. It's really hard, and I feel like you'll never really get closure. And to me, that's the worst part about being an expat. And I feel like that's the trade-off that I made
Mhm.
to have a life that I feel happy and just the most settled and safe and secure I've ever been. But again, it's like I always say, it's the deal I made with the devil, is yeah, missing and trying to grieve without your people. That's the hardest part.
Mhm.
So
But on the flip side, when you do get to go home, what's that like as the
oh,
homecoming for 5 weeks or so at a time when you get to go? And how
yeah.
often do you get to go home?
It depends. So before the pandemic, I was going once a year, and
Mhm.
that was when I was a new mom. Um, and I think now I'd love to go maybe every other year now that things are kind of back to normal. It's tricky though. And then as the children get older, you have school to factor in. And I think as we've learned through the pandemic that school isn't the be all end all. You can do some homeschooling if you need to. Like maybe it may not give the best results, but I think the children learn so much from the experience of traveling, but it's tricky, it's expensive. And when you get home, it's not relaxing or a holiday. It's actually really exhausting. So that's another thing to think about if you're planning on moving. And when you get home, you're usually pulled in a million different directions. And people are kind of like, well, why can't you just come to me? I'm only 3 hours away. And I'm like, I spent 30 hours getting here. You can come to me. So I think if you are really good with boundaries and making sure that you take time for yourself, if when you're at your hometown, and just saying, look, you can have like one big event where everyone comes to see you. That's hard because you get like 5 minutes with each person, but having people come to you and at least being able to see you is really important. And then you do your little things, but make sure that you book in rest time in between. And even just those nights, like, for my last visit, some of the best nights I had were just like watching TV with my mom on the couch, like just like back in the day, or or spending one whole day with an old friend where you could just like hang out.
Almost
Be normal.
unexpected, not what someone would
Yeah, not the
think.
big things like the big dinners and drinks and nights out and things like that, which are fun, but it's like you have to smash all of that into a little bit of time. And then when you get burnt out, like it's really hard to disappoint people to be like, I'm really too tired to make it. And I'm like, what? This is your one chance to see
Yeah.
me. So yeah, that's hard, but you just have to learn to do better, which has taken me a long time
Yeah,
to get
I
there.
learned that recently. Even just traveling domestically is now
Yeah.
that I live in Florida, going back to Illinois, I would first want to set up an appointment and a schedule with every single person here, here,
Yeah.
here. And then I'm like, I'm wearing myself thin.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say, I'll be here at this time. Whoever wants to
Exactly.
show up can show up
Exactly. And I
because
think,
this is my time.
yeah, that applies to anyone. If you live away from your home,
Mm.
just be really intentional about what the most important things to you are, the most important people, and then go from there. And again, like even for the people that you'd really love to see, but maybe they just aren't the inner circle, like maybe have one big open house, or like, just go to a restaurant and do like a pizza party, like
Mhm.
something where you can touch base with those people so you don't feel like you've missed out. They don't feel like they've missed out on seeing you.
Mhm.
Um, that can be helpful
Yeah,
because there's just a lot.
right.
Yeah.
And switching gears, as you can see behind us, we got some artwork.
Yeah.
And my cousin is an artist, and I wanted to dive into the depths of where this was inspired and where did this all start, because I have a lot of students who love
Yeah.
art, and
Hmm.
I don't quite know how to point them in the direction of
Yeah.
someone who's made it and someone who is doing this for a living. So, where did the passion for art
Yeah.
start?
Well, to be honest, it was always there. When I used to sit at our grandma's kitchen table and just like do arts and crafts all day long. I would sit still and do everything under the sun, coloring, drawing, like sewing, whatever. Um, so one message that I would give to young people who are artistic and creative and thinking about going into a career is, one thing I experienced is that I had a lot of negative messaging around what it's like to have a creative career. People say artists don't make money. You need to, like, my parents were like, be a lawyer, and I was like, oh, what? But at the time, I was, and it wasn't just my parents. It's a lot of people, a lot of teachers, mentors, friends. It's just, it's a common myth, I think.
Mhm.
And when I was growing up, there was no such thing as like being an influencer or a digital artist or a web creator or, like a marketing copyright. Well, yes, there were copywriters. They've been around forever. But I guess the example that I'm trying to get to is there are jobs and careers that come up that we haven't even thought of yet.
Mhm.
So keep that in mind. If you love something, even if it's a hobby, like always do it on the side. And on that note, it doesn't always have to be a side hustle either. Sometimes you do a creative hobby just because you love it.
Like me on this podcast.
Exactly. And look, it might turn into something.
Mhm.
I had an incredible mentor who was my editor at Buffalo Business First. Shout out Tim O'Shea. Um, and he said to me when I moved to Australia, he goes, write a blog, do it for a year. Do like pour your heart into it, do it for a year. Don't worry about making money from it or doing anything, and then see where that goes. And to be honest, like that expat life blog turned into like a mummy confessional blog about mental health and the challenges of new motherhood and isolation. And then that slowly evolved back into my creative passions, which I've always loved to paint. That was always my thing ever since I was a small child. And I found when I had my first daughter, I came back around to the idea of like, well, now or never. I want to show her that I'm not trying to stuff myself into a box, that I want to pursue what I love, even if I fail. And how can you fail? If you make art, you create something with your hands, it makes you feel good for a while. You get to enjoy it, or maybe someone else does, or maybe you throw it in the garbage but it's taught you something.
Mhm.
So to young creatives, just keep going. Like, and also don't feel bad if you have to take a job in order to support yourself in your hobby. They say, I think it was Austin Kleon who wrote Steal Like an Artist, who said, everybody needs a sponsor. So whether that's your partner or your spouse, whether that's a grant, whether that's your day job, all artists need a sponsor. So don't feel bad if that's what you need to do to keep pursuing your art, but don't ever give up. Keep an open mind, and just look for opportunities. But as long as you make art, you're an artist. Please, kids, don't give up. The world needs more creative humans.
That's amazing. So when you're grinding away in this space and you're, putting your heart and soul into it, what's that feeling like for you? And what do you get from that? The moments of just putting in your work.
Yeah. Well, when I'm making art, to me, if I'm lucky enough to get into a flow state, I don't think. I lose time. It's like therapy, it's like medicine. It's fun, it's hard, it can be frustrating at times. Times when it's easy, it's amazing. But I think the most important thing, again, another myth about art and artists is that you have to wait to be inspired to do the work. But I completely disagree. And I think you'll find that most successful artists, not that I'm saying I'm successful, but successful writers, Neil Gaiman said, you have to set the table for inspiration to join you, to come in. Like, so that means showing up every day, working, even if you don't feel like it. Sometimes you need to push through it. And then there's those magical moments when you are inspired and, creativity is flowing and it's all going easily, and that's awesome. But just show up and do the work. My studio is an organized mess. It's my happy place. We're currently renting our home, so it's not my dream space, but I think it's important to have your own space to create in, whether that's a corner of your kitchen table or a desk in your house, or maybe you find a collective that you can rent out a little part of a studio in your local community. Having a dedicated space to make stuff is just an important thing. And decorate it the way you want, or if you don't have the space, like, just make it your sacred little spot where you go and do your thing. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I just got done reading a book we talked about called Atomic Habits.
Oh yeah.
And it said the best way to create new habits is to have a new environment.
Oh,
And
okay.
if you are a young artist, or if you're just into whatever you're into, to find a new space to do something. Because if you're in a rut and if you're in the same places, you're going to have the feelings of what you're used to in that spot. But if you
Yeah.
go find a new spot, it's a new space for you, and you can really
Yeah.
get into that mindset you were
Yeah.
talking about.
And what's really interesting too on that note is, like, when I find myself being a bit stagnant or lacking ideas, my favorite thing to do is to, like, tidy up my studio. Maybe I'll, think of an idea that'll drop in, or I'll find some materials that I haven't used in a while. I forgot that I had them, and I'm like, oh, I want to do something with that gold leaf, or whatever the case may be. But it feels good when things are cleared out again in that space. But you're absolutely right. The environment plays a huge role. So it's something you need to give to yourself, I think.
Yeah. And staying on the art topic, there are some challenges involved, and whether it's mentally or financially, what are some challenges that you face just as an artist with this being your career?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is tricky, I guess. You never know when the next bit of work is going to come in or where it's coming from. I think the best advice I can give to emerging artists is to just share what you're doing, even if it's not done, like, while you're in progress. Because I think, that being one thing. And then the other is, like, tell the story behind why you're doing what you're doing. And yes, art is open to interpretation, but people really like to connect to your why and to you as an artist. They want to get to know the person creating and why they're doing it. So luckily, I love telling stories, and the other side of my job is copywriting. So I do try to share my work in progress and what it means to me. And then, of course, my viewers are open to interpret it however they like. But I think those things are really important. And again, it's sharing a bit of your vulnerability and yourself, because if you're putting a phony image out there, I really think audiences are a lot more savvy and they can tell. So yeah,
They can see through it.
yeah,
Just like they can see through a teacher who doesn't have their heart and soul into it.
a
They know
100%,
immediately.
a
It's
hundred
like, and
percent.
they'll talk about it. Like, we know they don't want to
Yeah,
be here.
that's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, um, speaking of art, your daughters were
Mhm.
playing with clay earlier this morning and
Yeah.
creating these beautiful
Yeah, that was cool.
animals. And yeah, you can go ahead and show
A little
that.
piggy that my 5-year-old made.
And they're just so creative. And I wanted to kind of talk about parenting because you have two beautiful
Yeah.
daughters under the age of 10. And
Mhm.
from the few times that I've met them, it's just been so inspiring to see you and Matt do co-parenting together. So I want to share a quick story.
Oh.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I'll never forget in 2019 when we were in Buffalo at a family function. Um, Lavinia, your oldest daughter, came outside and we were getting ready to play in Chief's backyard, and
Mhm.
she stopped and said, "Wait, guys, we need to make sure we have our sunscreen on.
Yeah.
We need to make sure we have our hats on." And this was a 5, 6-year-old girl at the time, like stopping the family and saying, "Make sure we're safe." And that moment will always stay with me because I'd never seen anything like it out of someone so young. So
Yeah.
that's a shout out to you and Matt for raising
Thanks.
them the right way. And it's something that will always stick with me. So I just wanted you to kind of elaborate on that. Do you remember that at all? And that is like my first image of Lavinia.
Yeah. Well, I don't remember it specifically, but well, one thing I mean that we can't take full credit for is that Australia has a really thin ozone above it, I guess, and the sun is incredibly strong here. And my husband's side of the family have had a history of skin cancer, like all of them. So they're all very pale, and so
Mhm.
are my children. So but that being said, my oldest is so responsible. She loves a rule. And she is also really nurturing and conscientious of others. So she's just that person who's very kind and sweet and looking after
Mhm.
everybody. So that's funny. Yeah, I'm not surprised. I don't remember the incident, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah. So with co-parenting and teaching them these lessons about not only the son, but just how to be a good person,
Mm,
what did you and Matt kind of decide when you decided you want to have children? Like, this is the way we want to raise our kids, because I just
yeah.
love seeing it even down here. Like, so many little things that the way you talk to them and the way that they respond to you is different from other children I've seen interact with their
Really? Like in what
parents.
way?
Well, I think you talk to them as if they're real people, and
Yeah.
it's not just you need to put that away. You
Yeah.
need it's mm, the relationship is much smoother and easier, and I don't feel like there's any intimidation.
Mhm.
I feel like you're all on the same page,
That's
and
really nice to hear.
it's really cool to see just from me being a fly on the wall
Yeah.
and kind of just picking up on little things.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, I mean, that is one thing that's always been really important to me, because I felt like, I mean, look, before they were born, I had absolutely no idea what my parenting strategy was going to be. I didn't know how to be a parent. I was like obsessed with the pregnancy and how my body was changing. Like, I didn't really think ahead. um, so, yeah, but I think when they were born, it's like you look at them and realize that they're human beings. I still, in some ways, feel like I'm a little 7-year-old, and so how would I want to be spoken to? So it's really important to me to speak to my children with respect always, as much as I can. Like, look, I lose my temper sometimes. We all do, but I don't want to be a dictator. And I also want to show them, the respect that comes from apologizing when I screw up. And then I find that by doing those things and really leading by example, that teaches them how to be. So like you'll hear my kids apologize to me or their dad or each other when they lose their temper or stomp their feet. Like it's amazing. I can't even like I read that somewhere in a book. Nurture Shock actually, which talks about the importance of apologizing. And I just, I think we were raised by a generation of parents that they were like this almighty authority on a pedestal, and were a little bit intimidating. And I never felt like I was better than them.
Yeah. And my dad and your dad grew up in a household of 10 siblings,
Oh yeah.
which I can't even
Well,
fathom
yeah,
how
parenting
grandma and
strategy
grandpa
was
did that.
for survival.
Yeah.
So yeah, they didn't know what they were doing. And I know that now. My parents did the absolute best that they could with what they knew. And I get that now more than ever. And look, I'm like nearly 10 years into being a parent. So Matt and I have had a lot of discussions and we've had to get on the same page. And, yeah, it might look like we co-parent really well, but there have been challenges over the years. Like usually my role is like reading all the psychology and then like taking what I think works, sharing it with him. And then like we just kind of, but our one big thing too is to always support each other and back each other up. So, they do play us. They'll be like, Mom, can I do the iPad? And like I don't realize that Dad's already said no, right? But we always try to be a united front, and that's something that's super important to
Mhm.
us as well.
And I can tell you read those books because there was a moment a few days ago where Matt had said something to the girls about eating, and you said, "Honey, like we're not supposed to
Oh
talk about
yeah.
food, especially with
You can't
girls."
use dessert as a bribe. You can't use food as like a manipulation for behavior. Like if everyone's having dessert, like you can't let one person cannot have dessert,
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
It's a rule. That's what the nutritionist said. But no, it makes sense. She goes, imagine you're at a dinner party and one of your friends doesn't like finish their salad. You don't go, you're not getting dessert. Like again, it comes down to like respect. Like how would you want to be treated just because they're children? Like you put it all in front of them, and if they eat what they eat, and my rule now is like if you don't want what I eat, make yourself a piece of toast. Not my problem. Like I'm over it. Even Matt would say like, don't let him even do that. Like I ate what was in front of me, and I'm like, well,
Yeah.
it's a mix.
Mhm.
It's a mix.
So, with that almost 10 years of parenting, is
Mhm.
there a particular lesson or just something you've learned that you could just share with our audience? Because I don't know, I'm having friends who are starting to have kids now, and I haven't really picked their brains about what it's
Yeah.
like because, I'm not ready for that point in my
Yeah.
life. But
Well,
would
you've
you?
got a whole classroom of it, Kyle. What are you talking about?
That's
It's like the
different.
ultimate. More influential than their own parents, probably. But yeah, advice to like to new parents.
Or just like something you've
Yeah.
learned about parenting that I don't know, maybe someone doesn't know or
Yeah. Well, I actually heard something on the We Can Do Hard Things podcast the other day, which I love, I'm obsessed with. You have to parent the child that you have,
Mhm.
right? And that each kid is different. And I think, my first child was quote unquote easy. And then my second one is not. And I'm like, what am I doing differently? But I mean, not only does the environment of the family change and all, your attention is divided and things are different with one child as opposed to two, their personalities are night and day. And I think you need to let them be who they are and support them and not try to put them in any boxes. God, it's a learning experience. And again, I'm only 10 years in. I'm not finished yet. And, you know, I'm still learning every day, but things are getting easier. Good luck to all the new parents out there.
Yeah.
It's a ride.
So I like to end the podcast with something called one thing on your mind, whether that's a movie, a TV series, podcast, book, anything that you're entrenched in right now. Is there anything?
Like something I'm consuming.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something you like that you'd like to share.
God, I'm obsessed with the author Samantha Irby, and her latest novel just came out. Like she writes these really self-deprecating novels. I found out about her from another writer that I follow, and she said something about like eating bologna wrapped up with cheese whiz and called it a carcinogen burrito. And I was like, oh, but the description, she's so smart and so funny. Her latest book just came out, but my favorite is crap, I can't think of the name of it. I'll get back to you on that. I think it's called Wow No Thank You. That's my favorite one. I laughed out loud. So yeah, I just started her latest book like last night and I'm pretty pumped about her. She is originally from Chicago and now lives in Michigan.
All right.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Well, the one thing that I've been into while I've been down here is Aussie rules football.
Oh my God.
And Matt and I have
Like
been
my
to a game
husband.
and watched a game, and I'm all about it because one of my college professors at Illinois State was a huge fan and is from Melbourne, and I'd always kind of known a little bit about it, but It's phenomenal. I really enjoy it and might keep up with the Bombers.
The Bombers. I mean, look, all due respect to Aussie rules football players because they are like gladiators. They wear hardly any clothes, including padding. No helmets, no padding, and they run around this giant oval field for like I don't know how long, how many hours it takes, but like they're
Yeah,
just
at least an hour,
the
20
physical
minutes.
fit. So you have to be big but fast. It's just crazy.
Mhm. And for those that have no idea what we're talking about, it's a mix of, I'd say,
Rugby,
rugby,
soccer, and
kicking field goals.
and I don't know, volleyball.
Yeah.
You don't actually really. Oh, you
Yeah.
do kick the ball into the goals, but
Yeah.
not like it's more
There's
punching.
like
You punch
5
the football.
sports into one.
It's nuts. It's interesting to watch. I like watching it live, but on TV, it loses me because they tend to zoom in on the players. I'm like, where is he in relation to this humongous field? Like he was down in one end, I was at the other. I'm just waiting for Bill's season.
Yes.
Yeah, but
It's our year.
God, people have been saying that for the last 20 years. I hope you're right. I don't feel so good about it. I had that feeling last year, but we all know what happened there.
And I think both of us will make it to a home game this year. So
Yeah, that'd be
hopefully
incredible.
that's the
I'm
plan. And
hoping to get back to Buffalo for the home opener. We'll see. Go Bills.
all right. Well, thank you, Don, so much for coming. This has been great.
Thanks for coming to visit. It's been so nice having you here.
Yeah, it's been great.
You're like the easiest house guest ever to do. Shout out if you want to invite Cal to visit. He's a dream. And he puts dishes away. It's so nice.
Well, thank you so much.
Love you.
Love you too.
Did we do that in 40 minutes? Amazing. Oh, invite it.